Hi everyone, and welcome to Scottish Autism, one of our Facebook Lives, a really important Facebook Live today, where we're going to be discussing the consultation that's opened on the Restraint and Seclusion Bill that is being tabled as a private member's bill by Daniel Johnson, MSP. So welcome Daniel Johnson, and welcome to Beth Morrison, who is Callum's mum and tireless campaigner, trying to address some of these issues that we see across our schools, and the injury and stress and trauma that has been caused to young children and young people where inappropriate restraint and seclusion has been used. So what we're hoping to do in this Facebook Live is talk over some of those issues, have Daniel explain what the bill is and how you can engage with it. And of course, you're very welcome to comment, to ask questions, and we'll pick them up as we go along. So we'll get started. Beth, welcome, and tell us why we need this bill.
Well, I'll try and keep it short. That's not very easy because there's a lot of reasons why we need this bill, but basically, if I can take you back just for a second or two to 2015, I did a Scottish Parliament petition calling for national guidance because I found out that after what happened to my son, that we had no national guidance. As a result of that, in 2017, the Scottish Government published Included, Engaged and Involved Part 2, which some of you may know was a document about preventing and managing school exclusions. But it only had 2.5 pages of guidance on the use of restraint. And I didn't think that was good enough. So I kept campaigning. In 2018, the Children's Commissioner for Scotland used their legal powers of investigation for the very first time. And as a result, they published No Safe Place in 2018. And that made recommendations to the government. And so far, the government have not done what they need to do to keep our children safe. Meanwhile, I've got families contacting me every day to tell me that their child has been injured and traumatised because they've been subjected to restraint and or seclusion. Since 2017 alone, when I started to really collate the family stories, I've had 1,756 families.
Wow.
That's 1,756 children. And they've been injured and traumatised. And you know what? Over 80% of these little kiddies are autistic. I don't think that's acceptable. That's why we need Daniel's bill. We need Daniel's bill to make sure that children have their human rights upheld and that they're safe, included and happy. That's why we need the bill.
And it's quite a hidden issue, isn't it? Because, you know, it's only when you've gone sort of public and people have come to you and shared similar. I mean, I think a lot of people would be quite shocked to hear some of these things have happened in our schools.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the thing is, families are frightened because if you have a child who's different and they're not doing great at school, and, you know, I remember I was taken into the school, every time I picked Callum up, and the head teacher wants to speak to you. And you know what, I was taken back to my childhood and, you know, being a child again in the head's office to tell me that my child was not doing this, wasn't doing that, and it's frightening. So that buys your silence almost. You kind of get into this terrible cycle of, you know, you're trying to be on the side of the school, but meanwhile, your child is being traumatized and you're frightened that, you know, what's going to happen if my child can't go to school? Are they going to be excluded? What's going to happen? So that buys your silence. And it's all hidden. It's all hidden. Then you try and do something about it and you're shut down. And this is what families are telling me. It's the same experiences time and time again. It's got to stop. We can't have this. I have to say here that the median age for these little kids is 6 years old. These are not big teenagers brandishing a weapon. They're little children. Cognitively and much younger. Chronologically, they might be of age to go to school at 5 and 6, but their ability cognitively is of a much younger child, and they don't understand the world around them very often.
Mm-hmm.
And they're expected to conform and do things that, you know, a normal child, a neurotypical child of that age can do. They just can't.
Yeah.
So the response to the environment, the way they're supported, it's distress, it's anxiety, and that's when the incidents happen.
It's really frightening. And so Daniel, if I can bring you in, first of all, can you explain what a private member's bill is? Because some people watching won't know what that is, and I'm not sure I know what it is. And can you tell us what your bill aims to do?
Yeah, well, actually, first of all, actually, I think it's your point about this being a hidden problem is it's a really important point because I think it is. But then actually, I think what's also important to point out is the scale of this is actually quite significant. So Beth was pointing about the Children's Commission report in 2018. Now it found that first of all, not all local authorities are recording these incidents. Only 18 local authorities were able to provide data, so that's 60%. And some local authorities aren't recording this data at all. But of the data they did obtain, they found 2,674 incidents relating to 386 children. That meaning that just on those just straight raw numbers, an average of just under 6 incidents per child. I think so given that that's not all local authorities, and given that actually that data wasn't even in every local authority able to identify individual children, you were talking about incidents that are happening to hundreds, if not thousands of children. And for many of those children, this is a regular, very often weekly, if not daily occurrence. So it's hidden, but it's also actually a very significant issue. So in terms of what I'm doing about this, so Callum's Law is something that Beth has campaigned tirelessly for. It is something that has been, in essence, called for by the Children's Commission, and most recently by the UN committee that oversees the UNCRC. So on June 22nd, it said that we need to have this put on a statutory footing. Now, in my view, the government should be doing this. But obviously, as an individual MSP and somebody who's not, in the government, the only option open to me is to table a members' bill or a private members' bill. And in essence, any MSP that's not a member of the government can do this. So it's not a quick process, but enables you to make a proposal for a law, and very roughly. You can do one at a time, and what that means is it's really about one per kind of parliamentary term, and so I brought forward a proposal which will do a number of things. First of all, it will require the government to put guidance that it has on the use of restraint and seclusion on a statutory basis, which will add a level of, I think, compulsion and consistency that non-statutory guidance just simply doesn't afford. It will also probably require the guidance to be a little bit more specific and comprehensive. And actually, in terms of the government's consultation on what it has done to date, that is one of the comments that actually comes back from teaching unions themselves, that it doesn't actually provide them and their members with a level of clarity. But beyond that, we can't just have the guidance on a statutory basis. We need to ensure that there's consistency about the capturing of data, so that it isn't ad hoc, that we have consistent information basis across all local authorities. Beyond that, it's not just, I think, that aggregate system level. We also need standards around actually informing parents when this has occurred. We need a consistent complaints process, so that actually when there are issues, that parents know how they can register their concern and complain about it. And when that doesn't go right, that there's a formal remediation process so that the issues can get resolved. And then finally, what we need is, we also need then, I think, national reporting on that information. And then finally, what we need is national standards on training, because I think while there are absolutely types of restraint and seclusion, which we need to see absolutely stamped out. We also need clarity about physical intervention and contact when that's appropriate. Now, I think that you can get into the niceties. What we don't want to do is create a situation where teachers and other professionals in the classroom feel they can't even hug children or have any sort of the constructive, positive physical contact. So what we need to do is have real clarity and national training standards, so that when physical contact and intervention is that we understand what is appropriate, what is not, but also when these incidents do occur, how they are then recorded, reported, and parents or guardians informed. So that's what my bill will do. As I say, it's not a quick process. The consultation is open right now. It will close on the 12th of September. And then there's a bit of a long drawn out process, which you essentially, in terms of drafting the bill and parliamentary stages that occur. So this is really kind of the sort of the starting stage to get that whole process kicked off.
Yeah, and that's really important, isn't it? Because these things do take a long time, and the start is really important. And there's a lot to unpick there in what you're calling for. Beth, what difference then? So these specific things about guidance, data, standards, complaints, what's going to make the difference? All of that, most of that, what difference will those things make to the parents that are contacting you?
Well, I think, as you alluded to and Daniel said, it is a hidden issue. When Callum went to school, Callum went to a normal mainstream primary school. I had absolutely no idea that they could even do these things to children. And I think we need to be very clear that it's, in all the years I've been doing this, over a decade, I've only had one situation out of the 1,750 odd in Scotland. Only one child was considered neurotypical. So there is definitely a discrimination against our children. By that, I mean children that are neurodiverse, children that are different. But as I said, over 80% are autistic. And we need absolute clarity for families. We also need the clarity for staff as well, because we've got to make sure that the staff get the support they need to do the jobs that they love. Because I don't believe for a second that a member of staff goes into a school or a children's home or anywhere saying, I'm going to restrain a child today.
Absolutely. And I think it should be important to say that, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we need to make sure that the staff get the training and the support. It's not just the training though, because training can stop at the training room door. We need to make sure that what is learned in the training room is implemented, and we need that practice leadership from the management and staff to develop this training, and it's to be an everyday occurrence. Because, you know, as I say, staff don't go into school every day to say, I'm going to restrain a child. But what we need to do is to give them the skills, the understanding that they need to be able to care for these children. Because it is not easy. It is not easy. If you're a member of staff and you don't understand autism or how an autistic child may present, how are you supposed to respond appropriately to that? So we need to make sure that it's clarity, first of all. We need to make sure that families know what route is open to them when things do go wrong, because the first protocol is always the school, the head. And often that is the end of it. It doesn't go beyond the headmaster or the headmistress's door. And they don't know about, you know, the complaints process. They don't know that they've got to go to the council. That all needs to be very clear for families. And they need to know that when they do complain, that the complaints will be taken seriously, because very often it's brushed off, and that's not any good either. So it doesn't give you any confidence then moving forward, and your relationship with the school breaks down. But we need to make sure that our children's rights are upheld. It's a human rights issue, and they're being discriminated because of their differences. That's got to stop. because we wouldn't inflict what's happening to our children to a neurotypical child. It's not happening. So it's our children that are disproportionately affected.
I think Daniel wants to jump in for a second.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think this is actually really important, but actually one of the things that actually since the launch I've sort of been thinking about is the contrast between how sort of incidents in the playground are handled and then these deliberate incidents. So, you know, most parents will be familiar with the little slip that comes back from home if, you know, their child, you know, falls over and scrapes their knee, and and it has to be countersigned, and it's got a little detail of what happened. And then that is very typical. You know, virtually every school will be doing that. So when a physical incident is accidental, that's the level of recording and information back to parents that's going on. And yet when the physical incident is actually deliberate, that's not happening. Now, why? Now, you know, you could just about accept I don't think it would be acceptable actually, but on the one hand, it would be understandable if there was no information going back to parents about physical incidents whatsoever. But the fact actually that when it's, you know, essentially an accident, they're doing that level of recording and informing, but when it's deliberate that it's not, is really quite incomprehensible to me. And I think shows you that there's something quite quite unacceptable is the word I'll use going on.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's someone's just making a comment asking. It's from PABSS, Positive and Active Behaviour Support Scotland, asking Daniel, do you think if we had a national framework, teachers and schools could come under the same statutory guidance that would help support schools and staff? I think that's what you're arguing for, isn't it? That's the end game. That's what you want to see.
It is a consistent framework for all teachers and staff working across different school settings.
Yeah, and Beth, I think we were talking to you there, and I know one of the precious things that you have is data. You have real life data, precious and shocking somehow. So what difference do you think the data gathering will make in terms of impacting these sorts of practices?
Charlene, I wish I knew.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, the fact is I have shared the data with the government.
Yeah.
And why I started to collect the data was in 2017. The then Cabinet Secretary for Education, Minister for Education, and the Deputy First Minister, John Swinney, sat in the Petitions Committee. He was talking about my petition. And he said, you know, that we would monitor the new guidance back in 2017. If it was found that it wasn't going to work, then they would look at this again in a couple of years' time. And here we are in 2023, and we're still no further forward. So I decided at that point, that's when I needed to start collecting the data. So, I mean, every time Callum and I are on the TV, I get literally hundreds of families coming to me. I've got groups of families. I currently support well over 1,000 families, you know, on support groups. And what they do is they fill in my family questionnaire, which is completely anonymous. And I don't keep any personal data because of GDPR, I'm not allowed to. But these families give me war and peace about what happened to their child. I see care plans. I see incident reports when they are recorded, which isn't very often. And I started to collect the data because I felt it was really important. Because, you know, the government are asking for, they want data, they want proof, and I can give them that. Data's one thing though, but the stories are another. And that's the important thing, is to listen to what the families are saying. That's what I've really tried to do. So for me, it's less about the numbers and much more about the human story, about what happened to that child. But can I also say, how many more pictures do I need to look at of bruised, battered children, 5, 6, 7 years old, covered in bruises? How many more do I need to see before the government take the action? It's so upsetting. I don't want to have to keep collecting the data, but I feel
it is, Beth, and I don't know how you do it, because some of the photographs certainly you've shared, that you've had permission to share, are very distressing. I suppose the data makes it visible, doesn't it? I suppose the data makes it accountability, and we talk about accountability a lot in this space, but it makes for accountability. So, sorry, Beth, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I do just want to say as well that over the years, as we've been collecting the data, I started to ask and look for the reasons why it was happening. And, this is a shocking thing. It's non-compliance. Little Jimmy was not doing as he was told. He wasn't following the teacher's instructions. That is not a legal reason to use. It's not lawful. It's not a lawful reason to use any kind of physical intervention that causes a child further distress. Non-compliance, not following the teacher's instructions, not doing as they're told. So I'm sorry, but I'm beginning to feel that these things are used as a form of physical punishment. Now, physical punishment was banned in Scotland in the 1980s, but yet I feel it's being used on our children to force compliance. It's a form of control that can't be right. I can't accept that.
No,
but that's what I feel.
It's not right. There's a comment that, every piece of data is a family who've been traumatized. We've got more than enough data, and I think that's absolutely correct. Can we move on to the consultation, which is happening just now? It's open just now, it's live, and we'll put details in the chat, and it's on our website, and we've been pushing it out on all our socials as well. It's open till the 12th of September. Daniel, why is the consultation important? An important part of the process for the bill?
Yeah, so I mean, it's important on two levels. I mean, there's the sort of the formal side, and then there's actually kind of winning the argument side of things. So it's actually so on the formal side, it's actually a requirement. So in order to bring forward a bill, I have to be able to demonstrate that there's support for it and have taken views, and I need to be able to present what those views for and against, and also in terms of the detail, so and be able to reflect those views. So it's important, and just in terms of being able to do this full stop. But I think it's also, important just in order to evidence, give voice, and I think take forward the arguments, and indeed even sort of expose, because I mean, as Beth points out, in no other element do we allow physical intervention, restraint to be carried out in this way without pretty significant levels of recording, especially when it's the state. So if it's the police or in the prison service, other areas where there is use of physical restraint, you have a huge amount of regulation and recording requirements, and yet in this context we don't have it. And likewise, we have made it illegal to use corporal punishment in schools. We've also outlawed the physical interventions by parents on their children, and yet we are allowing there to be a gap here. And I think most fundamentally, and just in terms of sort of Beth's characterization there about non-compliance, and this is what has drawn me in, it is at the root of all of this, I think, is a deep and fundamental misunderstanding of children with neurodevelopmental disorders. And I use that term specifically and advisedly, and I know that that last D of NDD is one that is not without controversy. But the point is this: is that we have a huge number of children that are at a diagnosable threshold in our mainstream schools, and actually what is happening through a lack of understanding, essentially teachers and others saying, they're not listening, they're not behaving, they're not complying, actually belies a fundamental misunderstanding of what is at minimum 10 to 15% of all the children in their charge, and probably around a quarter. And that's just not acceptable, because I think, and then most fundamentally, the children that are being subjected to physical restraint, they're just at the more extreme end of kind of the sort of non-inclusive practices. There's a broader range of essentially non-inclusion or at least teaching practice that just isn't a good fit for children that aren't in that kind of neurotypical band. And we have to tackle that. So in a sense, this is just the most urgent element of this, the most urgent end of a spectrum of issues that we have in our classrooms, because ultimately, we need teachers to be able to understand the different types of executive function, cognition, and comprehension that will exist within their classroom. And right now, I'm very concerned that we're just not where we need to be on that.
Yeah. Comment from Richard. Hi, Richard. The consultation that you published, Daniel, highlighted some really impressive developments internationally and in other countries in the UK, and introducing new laws on restraint and seclusion. Do you think there is an opportunity for Scotland to learn from some of these examples?
Do you know what? It's not actually a question of learning anymore. It's about catching up. We are now behind. We
That's
are
a great point.
in a place of international best practice. And when you've got the UN committee saying we need to do, and actually putting the statutory guidance, the guidance on statutory thing, it's a bare minimum. We really need the Scottish government to sit up and listen to that and get on with this.
Yeah. Beth, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I just want to say that I spent 2.5 years on a short life working group that lasted 2.5 years.
At least it wasn't a task and finish.
Yeah. But it was, it wasn't a short time. And I'm not looking for sympathy here, but a year of that I had cancer. And I helped to write the new guidance, which has still not been published. The consultation for that ended last October. So we're actually still working on the 2017 2.5 little pages of nothing that gave our children no protection whatsoever. And that guidance has been written. It is non-statutory. There's a lot of good things in there, but still we haven't had that published. Why can't we have that published and then, sort out what we need to sort out in the fullness of time, in accordance with the bill here? Right now, our children have no legal protection against the misuse and cruel use of restraint and seclusion. And it is really, really important that change is made very quickly. Daniel was talking about Scotland being behind. We are now. Northern Ireland, I helped a lady called Deirdre Shakespeare campaign for Harry's Law in Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland, in a very short space of time, relatively, during COVID, managed to write new guidance. It's going to be statutory. So Scotland are, well behind. And that's not good enough.
No.
And not after all these years of campaigning, not after all the data, not after the Scottish Government have every piece of information at their hands. They've had the UK experts in the short life working group to write their guidance. What's the problem?
And I think someone's making the point that it's a form of discrimination, and it is, and that's we're trying to be a more equitable, inclusive society, and these are some of our most vulnerable citizens. So it's really important that we address this.
It's actually a bit, I think it is discrimination, but I think it's actually more fundamental. And that, since 1982, we've had a right to education in Scottish law.
Yeah.
And actually, when you look at what is happening, both with restraint and seclusion, you are actually denying children their right to education. And so it goes, it is a pretty, it's more than just discrimination to my mind. It's actually a fundamental dying of what is a really important and basic right that we should have in a civilized society.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know a mother whose little boy, I think he's about 6 or 7 now, he's been subjected to quite horrible things at school, and that little boy's anxious about going back to school next week, but he only gets 30 minutes a day in school.
Yeah.
30 minutes. What's the point? So he's being discriminated against. Yes, he's got autism, he's got a learning disability, but 30 minutes in school. That's not upholding his legal right to an education.
And I think we hear a lot of challenging, difficult stuff through our advice line as well. I'm gonna sort of try and pull things to a close now. We don't have any more comments or questions on the chat, so it would be nice to give both of you a kind of last word, a call to action, if you like. So Beth, I'll start with you.
Sure.
Put out your battle cry.
Look, we just need to do the right thing. And the right thing is to make sure that we get statutory guidance to protect children in law. We've got to have mandatory recording and reporting. We have got to give staff the support that they need. And we've got to have this complaint system, a robust complaint system. There's so much that staff can do to prevent distressed behaviour in a child. The imbalance of power that there is in the classroom is unbelievable. And that imbalance of power between the school and the parents is a big thing as well. But the lack of expertise in autism and learning disability must be addressed. We've got to start upholding the human rights of our children. We've got to stop punishing children because of their difference. That has got to stop. But I'd just like to close by saying the price that our children pay for not being included, being subjected to this day after day, is a lifetime price. These bruises that these kiddies heal may heal, but the trauma lives and it stays forever. They're left with that lifetime of trauma. That's priceless. Please, let's do the right thing. That's all I want to say.
And that's so powerful, Beth. And I'm going to just divert a bit before I speak to Daniel, because there's a lady who's made a comment. She just stumbled upon the chat. A mum to a wonderful ASN child who's dragged by his feet into the head's office and restrained in primary 1. She's disgusted at the lack of effort from Scottish Government. She's a mental health nurse and legislation is epic for restraint, etc. in that field. It's appalling that there's nothing in the education system. Move school now, and she's saying, working with the school, I'm going to try and educate as many people I can on these things. And she also says you're all doing a fab job, and that's definitely for you and Daniel, doing a fab job. So there you go. There's a real world example of a horrible experience for a very, very young child. So Daniel, last word from you.
Well, in a sense, there's not a huge amount I can add to what Beth said. You know, the use of restraint and seclusion, in children essentially is denying them education. That's a very serious matter. So we need the absolute most robust, I think, guidelines and training to sit around that. That's fundamentally what my bill seeks to do. Is fundamentally why Beth has been campaigning for Callum's Law for all of these years. And I think that if people on the call agree with that, or if they have insight, they think that's important, I really urge them to go have a look at my consultation. The consultation document is detailed, but it's not long. But frankly, even if you don't make your way through that, answer some of the questions, provide your thoughts or your insight, why it's important, or what details you think are important or included in any legislation, because all of these views matter. The more people that we have contributing, the better. Certainly don't feel like you need to be a legal expert or understand the political process. Don't feel like you need to fill in the whole thing, but your views and whatever length you can you feel is important matter. So please look the page up. I think you're going to share the link, fill out the form, because it will really help.
Yeah, thanks. And I think we've had a really powerful discussion this morning. The link is in the chat, and if you're watching this on catch up, as I know many of you do, please scroll down the chat, because the link is there. And I think I've been around this world for a long time, and I think this is something that's relatively easy to do something about. It's a horrific problem, it's a horrific challenge, but it's in our gift to fix it. So please do fill out the consultation, and we'll watch with interest the progress of the bill. Just a final word from me. So much of what we've talked about today is about relationships and the way that we view each other in our society. Scottish Autism's conference is taking place on the 5th of October, and it's titled Why Relationships Matter in Social Care, but they certainly matter in education, in the wee shop round the corner, and standing at the bus stop. They just matter. So we've got some really leading autistic contributors to that conference on the 5th of October, and for parents of autistic people and autistic people themselves, there is a pay what you can option, so that it's as accessible as we can make it. So thank you so much to Daniel and Beth for joining us, and the fabulous Scottish Autism team behind the scenes. My camera went off briefly because I'm not fantastic and my battery was running out on my computer. So despite all their fabulous organisation, I still managed to make a mess. So thanks for watching. If you're watching and catch up, as I say, check out the link and let's get this done. Let's get this through. Let's get it done. So enjoy the rest of your day, and hopefully we'll see you soon. Cheers. Thanks guys.